the Galactic Union had always feared Deathworlders. Every known species in the universe was categorized based on the environment of their homeworld, and Earth was labeled as a Category 5 Deathworld, one of the most dangerous habitable planets ever discovered. The creatures that roamed its surface were resilient, its weather was unpredictable, and the dominant species, humans, were an enigma that many civilizations preferred to avoid. There were rumors that humans thrived in war, that they trained for battle from childhood, and that their entire existence revolved around conflict. To confirm these unsettling reports, a team of alien researchers was sent on a mission to observe human behavior firsthand. Their objective was simple: gather evidence of human warlike nature and determine the level of threat they posed to the peaceful races of the galaxy. But nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to witness. The observation team, composed of 6 different species from across the Union, landed in a region covered in a thick blanket of white frost. Their advanced cloaking technology allowed them to move unseen among the humans, setting up hidden surveillance equipment in a vast open field where humans had begun to gather. At first, the aliens assumed it was some form of a military drill. Large numbers of humans, adults and younglings alike, were working together, shaping humanoid figures out of frozen water. Some were forming walls and barriers. Others were arranging the figures in orderly rows. The researchers exchanged nervous glances, their eyes widening in alarm. This was clear evidence of human war preparation. Were they building effigies of their enemies before a battle? Was this some kind of ritual to inspire their warriors? The lead researcher, a pale-skinned being named Vosrek, recorded every movement with meticulous detail, whispering into his data recorder about the terrifying efficiency of human war culture. Then, without warning, the chaos began. One human launched a small, compacted sphere of frozen water at another. Instead of responding with aggression, the second human laughed and retaliated with a projectile of his own. Within moments, the entire field erupted into what could only be described as an all-out battle. Snowballs flew through the air, striking targets with surprising accuracy. The younglings, far from being afraid, dove behind their makeshift barriers and launched counterattacks, their small hands expertly crafting ammunition at an alarming speed. The adults joined in, some forming strategic alliances, others laughing as they waged war against their own families. From the aliens' perspective, it was a nightmare unfolding before their eyes. They had expected war, but this was worse. Humans were not just fighting, they were enjoying it. Panic spread through the observation team as they analyzed the situation. The sheer level of coordination was staggering. Some humans took on leadership roles, directing their teams with precise commands. Others created diversions, sacrificing themselves for the greater good of their squad. Flanking maneuvers, rapid tactical retreats, strategic bombardments, all methods that had taken other species centuries to develop, were being instinctively performed by these humans for fun. The implications were terrifying. If this was how humans trained their younglings, then the galaxy was right to fear them. Even the weakest among them, those with the smallest frames and the least experience, displayed an innate understanding of battle. A young human, barely tall enough to be noticed, constructed a fortress of ice and held off a dozen attackers before being overwhelmed. Instead of despair, he simply laughed and vowed revenge. Vosrek's breathing quickened as he spoke into his communicator. They are warlike beyond imagination. Even their children engage in structured combat. Their younglings show no fear, only determination. If this is a mere game to them, then what must real war look like? The Union must be informed immediately. But as they continued to observe, an unsettling realization began to creep into the researchers' minds. There was no malice in this conflict. The humans were not fighting out of hatred or conquest. They were playing, bonding, growing stronger together. The so-called battlefield was filled with laughter, not screams. When one side overwhelmed another, they did not show cruelty, but instead offered their fallen foes a hand to rise again. It was illogical. War was supposed to be brutal, merciless. And yet, these humans had taken something as violent as battle and transformed it into a form of entertainment. A new kind of fear gripped the observers. What kind of species could turn war into something so casual? The implications sent shivers through their spines. They had not discovered an army preparing for destruction. They had found a species that thrived in the art of conflict itself, not for the sake of war, but for the joy of competition, the thrill of strategy, and the bonds it created. And that made them even more dangerous. The alien observers had never seen anything like this before. What had started as scattered groups of humans throwing snow projectiles at each other had now transformed into something far more structured, far more coordinated. The battlefield, if it could even be called that, was no longer chaotic. It had become an organized war zone, with distinct sides, strategic defenses, and an eerie level of discipline. The snow figures that had once stood harmlessly across the field now appeared as armies, carefully arranged in formation, some equipped with makeshift weapons like sticks or shields made from frozen ice. The observers, hidden behind their cloaking devices, watched in stunned silence as the human factions assembled, their breath misting in the cold air as they prepared for what appeared to be a grand-scale battle. On one side of the field, a group of children worked tirelessly, constructing walls of snow to shield themselves. They reinforced the structures, layering ice to make them stronger, creating openings to launch attacks while staying protected. Behind these walls, stockpiles of snowballs were neatly stacked, ready for deployment. Meanwhile, their opponents, an equally determined force of adults and older children, moved into formation, their hands swiftly crafting ammunition, their eyes locked onto their target. It was a sight both impressive and terrifying. The alien researchers had seen real war before, had studied the battle tactics of countless species across the galaxy, but never had they witnessed an army built entirely out of leisure. Then came the moment that sent chills down their spines. A single voice from the children's side rang through the air, a high-pitched but commanding cry that signaled the beginning of the assault. Without hesitation, a barrage of snowballs launched into the sky, arcing over the battlefield before raining down upon the enemy ranks. The opposing force, undeterred, retaliated with their own counterattack, unleashing a wave of frozen projectiles that struck the fortifications with surprising precision. The battle had begun, and it was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. What unsettled them the most was not the scale of the war, but the level of strategy involved. Humans, even the youngest among them, showed an instinctive grasp of battlefield tactics. Some acted as scouts, darting across open spaces to gather intelligence before retreating behind their defenses. Others served as artillery, launching long-range attacks while staying hidden from enemy fire. And then there were the shock troops, bold warriors who charged into enemy lines, dodging snowballs with impressive agility, engaging in direct combat before falling back to regroup. It was warfare in its purest form, but the humans were laughing. One of the observers, a reptilian researcher named Kel Zan, couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. "This is madness," he whispered, his voice barely concealing his horror. "They are treating battle as if it is entertainment." His trembling claws tapped rapidly against his datapad as he recorded his findings. Their younglings fight with no hesitation, no fear of pain or loss. Their tactics are precise, their formations disciplined. They learn the art of war before they are even fully grown. How can a species like this be stopped? As the battle raged on, new elements of human ingenuity became apparent. Some warriors crafted shields out of sleds, deflecting incoming projectiles as they advanced. Others launched sneak attacks, tunneling through the snow to emerge behind enemy lines, catching their opponents by surprise. The aliens could hardly believe what they were witnessing. This was not mere play. This was training. This was instinct. Then, something even stranger happened. In the midst of the fierce battle, a temporary ceasefire was declared, not out of exhaustion, but for diplomatic negotiations. The leaders of both sides, covered in snow and panting from exertion, approached each other under a flag of truce. They spoke, exchanged strategies, laughed at their failed maneuvers, and then, as if nothing had happened, returned to their sides and prepared for an even larger battle. The alien observers were speechless. Humans, after engaging in structured combat, did not harbor grudges. They did not seek revenge. Instead, they analyzed their own weaknesses, learned from their defeats, and embraced the experience. Kelzane turned to his fellow researchers, his eyes wide with realization. "We have made a terrible mistake," he muttered. "We assumed humans were violent because they were warlike. But that is not the truth. The truth is far more dangerous." He exhaled slowly, glancing back at the battlefield, where laughter echoed across the snow-covered field. "They do not fight because they must. They fight because they love the challenge. And that makes them unstoppable." The battle had escalated beyond anything the alien observers had expected. What had begun as a seemingly harmless game had transformed into a demonstration of pure tactical brilliance. The snow-covered battlefield was no longer just a playground. It had become a war zone, a stage where humans tested their strategic minds against one another. The observers, hidden in their cloaked positions, recorded everything with growing unease. Every move the humans made, every decision they took, was calculated, efficient, and executed with an understanding of warfare that most species took centuries to develop. These were not simple skirmishes. They were carefully planned engagements, with each side adjusting their tactics in real time, adapting to the changing battlefield with astonishing speed. On one side, a group of children had fortified their position, turning their snow fortress into an impenetrable stronghold. They had built thick walls reinforced with ice, creating a defensive line that absorbed incoming projectiles with ease. Behind these walls, smaller squads moved in coordinated efforts, each tasked with a specific role, some focused on crafting ammunition, others on launching precision strikes, while a select few served as scouts, constantly observing enemy movements and relaying information back to their commanders. On the opposing side, the older and more experienced humans had formed an attacking force, their approach methodical and relentless. They did not waste their energy in direct assaults, but instead applied pressure through a series of feints and diversion tactics. A small group would launch an attack from one direction, drawing the defender's attention, only for another squad to flank from the opposite side, striking where the enemy least expected. It was warfare in its purest form, and yet the humans laughed as they fought. The observers could hardly believe their own eyes. The younglings did not panic under pressure. Instead, they adapted, quickly changing their formations to counter each new tactic used against them. When their defenses were breached, they did not flee, they regrouped, reinforcing their positions and launching counterattacks with precision. They understood the importance of supply lines, ensuring that fresh snowball ammunition was constantly being delivered to the front lines. They knew how to exploit terrain, using higher ground for better throwing accuracy and digging trenches to shield themselves from enemy fire. It was a level of battlefield intelligence that was unnatural for a species so young, so seemingly primitive. And yet, the results spoke for themselves. Humans were natural strategists, and they did not need war to learn it. It was in their very nature. One of the observers, a reptilian tactician named Varkin, watched in stunned silence as a group of younglings pulled off a maneuver that made his scales shiver. Feigning a retreat, they lured their attackers into an open area where hidden allies lay in wait. The ambush was swift and brutal. Snowballs rained down from all sides, overwhelming the unprepared enemy forces, forcing them to scatter in all directions. It was a textbook trap, one that even experienced military commanders would have struggled to execute. Varkin's claws twitched as he made frantic notes in his datapad. "They are not just playing," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. "They are learning. They are evolving. Every defeat makes them stronger. Every failed strategy is refined for the next engagement. They see loss not as failure, but as an opportunity to improve. No species in the galaxy fights like this." As if to confirm his fears, the battle took another unexpected turn. One of the human leaders, a teenage boy who had taken command of the attacking force, called for a complete shift in strategy. Recognizing that direct assaults were proving ineffective, he ordered his troops to construct mobile shield sleds and wooden boards covered in snow to act as moving cover. Using these makeshift barricades, they advanced under heavy fire, closing the gap between them and the defenders. The younglings, caught off guard by this new tactic, scrambled to adjust, but the older humans had already seized the advantage. In a coordinated effort, they breached the fortress walls, overwhelming the defenders in a final, decisive push. The battle was over. But instead of anger or frustration, the defeated younglings laughed, shaking hands with their opponents, already discussing what they could have done better for the next encounter. Varkin turned to his fellow researchers, his expression filled with something close to fear. "This is why the galaxy fears them," he muttered. "Not because they are violent, not because they are strong, but because they turn everything, even war, into a lesson. They do not break under pressure. They do not fear defeat. They grow stronger with every battle, whether real or imagined. That is why they are unstoppable." And as the humans, young and old, began preparing for another round, the aliens could do nothing but watch in silent horror, realizing that they had just witnessed the most dangerous aspect of humanity, not their weapons, not their numbers, but their minds. The alien observers had seen enough. They had arrived on Earth expecting to find a primitive species, one that relied on brute force and aggression to establish dominance. Instead, they had uncovered something far more dangerous, a species that turned war into play and play into war. Every battle these humans fought, even with mere snow, was a calculated exercise in strategy, a test of endurance, a lesson in adaptability. But what unsettled the observers the most was not the battle itself, it was what happened after the battle. There were no grudges, no lingering hostility. The defeated did not wallow in despair. They simply analyzed their mistakes, shared tactics with their enemies, and prepared for the next encounter with even more refined strategies. It was a terrifying cycle, one that no other species in the galaxy seemed capable of replicating. And yet, despite everything they had witnessed, the true moment of fear had yet to come. If humans gathered to discuss their next game, a new challenge arose, one that would unknowingly push the observers into the very heart of this strange human tradition. One of the older children, a girl with bright eyes and an unmistakable air of leadership, stood atop a small mound of snow and raised her voice. "We need new opponents," she declared, excitement radiating from her every word. "We've fought each other all day. It's time to take on a real challenge. Someone we've never faced before." Her words sparked a murmur of agreement among the others. The humans turned, scanning the field, searching for anyone new to join the battle. And then, to the horror of the hidden alien observers, the humans looked directly at them. For a brief moment, panic spread through the research team. Their cloaking technology was flawless, their presence undetectable by human senses. And yet, there was something in the way the humans stared into the seemingly empty space around them, as if they felt the presence of unseen warriors lurking nearby. The lead observer, a nervous avian-like being named Rule Talk, whispered frantically into his communicator. "They know something is here. They are searching for us. This is not possible. Our stealth systems are beyond their comprehension." But the humans continued to scan the area, their eyes filled with curiosity and challenge, their minds already constructing the possibility of a new, unknown enemy. Then came the moment that made Rule Talk's feathers stand on end. The young girl pointed toward the empty space where the observers stood. "I bet they're out there," she said, grinning. "Invisible warriors. Watching us. Studying us." Her tone was playful, but her instincts were sharper than any the observers had encountered. "Maybe they're afraid to fight. Maybe they're not ready for a real battle." A chorus of laughter erupted from the crowd, but there was an edge to it, a taunt, a challenge disguised as humor. The humans were not mocking an absent foe, they were provoking one, daring it to reveal itself. Rule Tech swallowed hard. It was absurd. There was no way these primitive creatures could detect them. And yet, somehow, they had issued a challenge as if they knew, deep down, that something was there, watching. He turned to his fellow researchers, who stood frozen in terror. "Do not move," he whispered. "Do not react." But the humans had already begun their march toward their unseen enemy, pelting the empty air with snowballs, launching their attack with unwavering confidence. The projectiles passed harmlessly through the space where the observers stood, but the intent behind them was clear: fight or be forgotten. And that was when Rule Talk realized the true nature of these beings. Humans were not just warriors. They were hunters of challenge. It didn't matter whether their enemy was real or imagined, seen or unseen. If there was a possibility of an opponent, they would fight. If there was a test to be passed, they would rise to it. They did not need to see their adversary to engage with it fully. The very idea of competition was enough to drive them forward. And worst of all, they did not fear losing. They would fight for the joy of battle itself, not for victory alone. The humans laughed and continued their assault on the unseen enemy. The alien observers knew one thing with terrifying certainty: this was not a species that could be intimidated. This was a species that would challenge the very universe itself. The High Council of the Galactic Union had always believed they understood the nature of war, strategy, and survival. For centuries, they had studied countless species, analyzing their methods of conflict, their philosophies of battle, and their approach to victory and defeat. But nothing could have prepared them for what they had just witnessed on Earth. The reports had already shaken the foundations of their understanding, but the live feed from their hidden observation drones had done something far worse. It had instilled fear. Humanity, a species so young by galactic standards, had demonstrated something far more dangerous than mere aggression or advanced weaponry. They had turned war into a game. The gathered leaders sat in stunned silence as the final moments of the human battle played on the massive screens before them. It was just harmless, fleeting, fragile, yet the way humans had utilized it had turned a simple game into a grand display of strategy, adaptation, and relentless learning. The defeated did not mourn their losses. Instead, they laughed, analyzed, and prepared for the next encounter, each failure making them stronger. This was not how war was supposed to work. The grand strategist of the T-Varian Empire, a species known for its military dominance, finally broke the silence, his deep voice laced with disbelief. They fight for sport. They test their strategies in harmless ways, refining them before real war even begins. They make battle a lesson, a puzzle, an endless challenge. He leaned forward, his reptilian eyes narrowing. Do you understand what this means? The council remained frozen, unwilling to voice the thought that had already begun forming in their minds. Humanity's greatest strength was not their technology. It was not their physical abilities. It was not even their weapons. It was their very mindset. Unlike other species that only sharpened their skills in times of war, humans practiced every single day in games, in competitions, in harmless conflicts that slowly, methodically forged them into the deadliest strategists the galaxy had ever seen. And worst of all, they enjoyed it. The representative of the HFY, an insectoid species known for its hive mind intelligence, clicked its mandibles anxiously. This is unnatural. No species should approach war with such ease. They do not see battle as a necessary evil, nor as a tragic event. They see it as a challenge to be mastered. The thought was horrifying. The greatest civilizations of the galaxy had only survived through careful avoidance of unnecessary wars. Every battle was a calculated risk. Every war fought only when survival demanded it. But humans? Humans thrived on challenge. Whether the stakes were high or low did not matter to them. They would fight, learn, adapt, and then fight again, each time better than before. Then, the most terrifying thought of all was spoken aloud. A deep, rumbling voice came from the back of the chamber. It belonged to an elder of the Vornak, a species that had once ruled half the galaxy before being defeated in an ancient war. The elder's voice was heavy, filled with something that the others could not quite recognize at first respect. "We have made a grave mistake," he said slowly, his gaze locked onto the screen displaying the human battlefield. "We assumed that the greatest threats to our civilizations would be those who sought conquest, those who craved bloodshed, but we were wrong." He gestured toward the footage of laughing humans, already preparing for their next strategic encounter. The true threat is not a race that loves war. The true threat is a race that sees war as a game, because they will never stop playing. A wave of unease rippled through the council. They had spent centuries monitoring potential threats, analyzing warlike species, and ensuring they never grew strong enough to challenge the balance of power. But humanity was different. They were not a race that sought endless conquest. Nor were they driven by destruction. They were something far worse, a race that sought challenge, one that would never stop learning, never stop improving, never stop winning. And for the first time in galactic history, the rulers of the stars felt something they had never expected to feel toward a species so young. Dread.